This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
The road to the NBA Finals ends here, with star guards setting the tone. The Cavs eye another upset, while the Knicks carry the dreams of all of New York. The Eastern Conference Finals continue on ESPN and ABC.
Welcome back to The Case For with Chris Cox, the pretend procedural, which is set not in the court of last resort, but rather in the court of the Disney World Resort. This is the podcast where theme park expert Len Testa and mind reader Chris Cox will regularly debate some of the more trivial aspects of vacationing in Orlando. What makes visiting there a complete joy or an absolute misery? I am the less than honorable James Robespierre Hill. I will be presiding over today's proceedings, and after hearing Chris and Len's arguments, I will then render my verdict. All verdicts are final until, of course, they're not, which means that we'd love to have you, the listener, weigh in with your thoughts on these not-so-weighty matters.
So, Your Honor, okay, but why is it for this week's podcast I can hear you, but I can't see you?
Maybe, Your Honor, are you imitating the spirit of justice?
The spirit of justice.
Ooh, no, gentlemen. This time around, I'm paying tribute to Judge Joseph Force Crater, who back in August 6, 1930, climbed into a cab in New York City and was never seen again.
Oh yeah, I've heard this story. This is the New York Supreme Court justice who lived something of a double life.
Yes, he did. Joseph had a wife that he kept up in Maine, as well as a showgirl girlfriend that Crater kept in Atlantic City.
And then one day he just disappeared.
Under very mysterious circumstances, as if disappearing suddenly is anything other than mysterious. He apparently bought a ticket to a Broadway show at the Belasco Theater.
Oh, I know the Belasco. Yes, I used to walk past that on my walk to the Neil Simon Theatre, which I appeared in when I was performing in The Illusionists on Broadway. I don't like to talk about it. It was back in 2019.
You played on Broadway?
I don't like to talk about it.
Why didn't you ever say anything about it?
There we go. Well, anyway, back to the Belasco. Before Crater goes to the Belasco, he first cleans out his safe deposit box, and then he cashes a check for $5,000.
I mean, but that's typically what you do when you go see a Broadway show. I mean, have you seen what tickets for Hamilton are costing these days?
You can still see it for free on Disney+. And then what? Judge Carter, he climbed into a cab and then, like a disappearing act, never was seen again.
Yeah, and there's a nationwide search, not to mention a $10,000 reward that no one ever claimed because, again, the guy just disappeared.
Here's my first question. Did anyone ask his wife where he happened to be?
Interesting that you bring up Stella Crater, because every August 6th, and that's the anniversary of his disappearance, she would supposedly go to a bar and order 2 drinks. And she would then leave one glass untouched on the bar and then raise her glass in a toast. And this is what she'd supposedly say. Just, good luck to you, Joe, wherever you are.
Oh, that is It's a little bit sad, a little bit creepy. Both column A, column B.
Yeah, it depends on how you phrase that. Like, this is one of those things where intonation really makes all the difference.
It reminded me of a friend of mine who was notorious for not telling his wife what he was doing. And he one day she was expecting him home for dinner, and he was in the middle of doing a thing, which meant he was very busy, and basically got home 2 days later and got through the door, and his wife was like frantic, as like, "Where have you been?" And without missing a beat, he just went, "The parking has been a nightmare." It's a perfect excuse for any time you're delayed.
When he woke up in the hospital was He still has memory. That's good. That's good. Okay. All right.
Well, speaking of Stella and her two cocktails, I thought, we'd share this story today because on this week's The Case For, you guys are going to talk about places on Walt Disney World property where you can get adult beverages.
That's right. Adult lounges like Geo 82 at EPCOT and family lounges like the Beak and Barrel at the Magic Kingdom.
And this actually was a suggestion from Dan Bodenstein. Could be Bodenstein. I'm sure he'll correct me via the internet. It's a very good thing. I recommend it. So if you've got any suggestions for Case Force, feel free to get in touch. All the socials and details are probably in the show notes, or, just Google. It's really useful for many things. So, Len, I know that you are a fan of a lounge, in particular sitting in one and having a beverage. What are our options in these lounges? The adult lounges, we've got Geo 82. I think there's Enchanted Rose. Would that count as an adult lounge at Grand Floridian, or is that more a bar?
Here's the thing. I mean, it's Disney World, right? So all of the lounges are going to be family friendly at almost any hour of the day. I can't think of any lounge that's going to prevent children from coming in because, again, you're in a theme park. That said, there's decor, there are menu items that seem to indicate that some lounges are more geared towards families and others are more geared towards adults. So it's going to be a blurry line here, but we're going to try and draw it. I would say Geo 82 is an adult lounge. Beak and Barrel, more of a family lounge because you want to recruit kids to piracy early, right?
It's like compound investing, right? The earlier you get in, the better.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get their sea legs established while they're young. It helps with inner ear balance, right? But I think that a place like Enchanted Rose, that would also be an adult lounge.
What about Ogres? I took the kids in there. I would say it's probably slightly more adult, but the family are fine.
I think so. I think Ogres is a family lounge, yeah.
Where in the spectrum, though, would you add, EPCOT. EPCOT's got Space 220, right?
Space 220, right. That's interesting because the lounge is actually above and behind the main restaurant. I think Space 220 looks good for older kids. Chris, you've been there, right?
No, you know what? We've never been to Space 220. It's always on our dining plan of like, maybe we should, but we end up in one of the better options at Epcot.
Right. And I think that's part of it. It's a bar, but it's a bar where you're waiting to drink before you go have dinner. It's not that the bar itself is the destination, if you will. That's an interesting question, though.
Yeah, and again, the irony here, of course, is, Oga's, once upon a time, that was actually the plan with Oga's as well. That was where you were supposed to, have a beverage before you then moved on to the supper club that never got built at Black Spire Outpost.
Oh, I never knew that.
It's really interesting to see in the survey results, which we're going to talk about here in detail, how you can see sort of a qualitative difference in results between the things that we would consider adult lounges and the things that we would consider family lounges. We'll go over them.
So I think for this, let's assume, since the two newest lounges are going to be Beak and Barrel at Magic Kingdom and Geo 82 at Epcot, let's assume Geo 82 is our go-to adult lounge and Beak and Barrel is our go-to family lounge. I haven't experienced any of them because my kids are 6 and 8, and when we visit theme parks, we spend our time going on rides and quickly eating or maybe having a sit-down meal. We've never had the chance to just sit down and enjoy a lounge, even though my legs and my aching body would love it. I feel like I walked past Geo 82 the other week when I was in Epcot, and it looks amazing through that little gap in the window you get. I feel like I wouldn't have a particularly restful time in there if I took the kids in. But if it was just me and Helen, we'd probably have a very restful time, but spend a small fortune on cocktails. Would I be right, Len?
I think you would. The thing that I appreciate most about Geo 82 is the commitment to the Spaceship Earth decor theme. So from the moment that you walk up the stairs or take the elevator into the little greeting area and lounge, you see triangular motifs everywhere to mimic the tiles on the outside of the attraction. There's a lot of the really great lighting in there. The staff is very welcoming. Last time I was there, we were greeted with warm towels to sort of refresh ourselves with before we went into the dining. The room itself is actually fairly compact. The tables are fairly close together. and it is louder than I would expect from some lounges, just because of the type of material that they're using and the fact that they're packing so many tables into it. But I think overall the theme is very sophisticated. Chris, to your point, I don't think kids would really appreciate either the atmosphere or the menu items. I mean, every child I know loves a charcuterie board. I'm sure yours do too. But I don't know that the other things on the menu are necessarily there for kids.
I like the how well themed it is, because if I'm taking time, I think one of the cons for either lounge is that often if you're visiting a theme park, you're going to visit a theme park. You're trying to see the rides, the shows, the attractions. And, you know, spending time in a lounge means you're taking time away from the money you've spent to enjoy the rest of a theme park. So it being part of that experience and well themed, that is a positive. But am I right in thinking you can't really linger in the lounges? You've got to get out of there pretty quick.
The first time I was there, we had a 45-minute limit on how long we could stay, and at minute 44 our server brought the check and said, here's your bill, is there anything else I can get you? And the order in which those things were presented was like, please don't answer yes to that second question.
They start a timer as soon as you sit down. It's just enjoy a ticking clock the whole way through it.
Now the second time that I was there, the most recent time, did not have any of that, but Beak and Barrel over at the Magic Kingdom, I think, still is fairly closely enforcing that 45-minute limit to do turnover on the tables. And I think we're going to see that in terms of guest satisfaction as well.
Well, now, speaking of guest satisfaction, and forgive me for bringing this up about Beak and Barrel, but when you and I and Mr. Schul went in there during our visit to the park, I mean, it's a wonderful theming, but we wound up in the equivalent of the back room, seated against the wall, and, our exposure to all of the wonderful theming was very, very limited. I can't help but think, if Chris ever brings his daughters in there and they have a similar experience where it's like, here, you're crammed into the back corner, you've paid, a good amount of money to get in there, and you're not getting much of a show, that's not a great experience.
This is one of the interesting things about Beak and Barrel, because the Imagineers had a couple of challenges. One was they needed to make this thing as heavily themed as Trader Sam's, with interactive elements and story surprises and roving cast members who add to the overall theme. On the other hand, they had a specific footprint that they had to work within, because they're taking out retail space from Pirates of the Caribbean and from the queue as well. So they had some constraints that they had to work in. And to your point, Jim, as a result, when we were seated, we were in the room to the right of the entrance. Not only were we seated with other people who weren't in our group, but we were facing a wall. And in the back.
Was it a well-themed wall, at least?
The stucco was immaculate. Looked like it had been there for decades, if not hundreds of centuries.
Yep.
But it was not the best place to view. Had we been with our backs to the opposite wall, had we been, exactly to the opposite side of we would have been able to see a lot more. And what I feel here is, and we'll see this again in the satisfaction results, what I feel here is, for the amount of effort it takes to get a reservation, for the cost of the drinks, every seat has to be good. And every experience has to be good. And I don't think we're there yet with the Beak and Barrel. Yeah.
What about a Geo? Is there a bad seat in the house, I suppose, is the question.
No, I don't think there is. Generally, whenever I'm, wherever I'm going to a lounge and I'm going with Laurel, I'm seated so that I'm giving her the best view. So I'm looking at Laurel, Laurel's looking at the view. But in the last couple of times I've been there, though, without Laurel, the views are very good. I don't know that the view necessarily out into the rest of Future World is fantastic. It probably really, really good at night. I'm usually there in the afternoon. But inside is very pretty. I mean, the inside theming of that lounge is very good by Disney standards. It's not quite the DVC lounge in the Imagination Pavilion, which has the benefit of, $100 million worth of infrastructure. But for what it is, Geo 82, I think, is a really well themed bar. Beak and Barrel is really well themed too. but it's got some dead spots in it, and I don't think GO82 necessarily does.
And I suppose with GO82 as well, the key view is the fireworks view, right? But you can't just go and get a drink for the fireworks. It's a package deal, right?
No, that's a special thing, right? And at that point, what'll happen if you're in a seat that is reserved for somebody for fireworks seating, they will discreetly ask you to either move or leave. For that. So they do enforce that 45-minute limit specifically for giving people that opportunity to see the fireworks. And it's probably great. I haven't been there at night to do it. I would rather be out on the lagoon for that one. Ask me again in July, though. I might say something different.
And then going back to like adult and family lounge, which one's better here? In terms of, let's assume again, Beak and Barrel family, adult, GO82, the quality in the food and beverage offerings, is there any real difference other than the menu choices?
I think so. I think the food choices are better at GO82. Enchanted Rose, Chris, you mentioned earlier. I don't think the food is that great at Space 220, but it's arguably better than either at Oga's, Beak and Barrel, or anything similar to that. What would you guys say Trader Sam's is? Is Trader Sam's a family lounge or an adult lounge?
I have a somewhat troubled history with Trader Sam's. In fact, a little background. Alice's stepfather collects tiki mugs. So, whenever I was headed down to Walt Disney World, I'm a good supportive ex-spouse, so I would drop in there and pick up the latest tiki mug. But I want to say 6 times trying to get into the lounge. I was always sent to the outside patio. I never arrived at a time when I could gain entry to the actual Trader Sam's. And I was still able to pick up the tiki lounge. I was still able to sit outside and have my adult beverage, but never, had the experience. And it wasn't until our mutual pal Nate, called in a favor and more to the point told me, look, the bar closes at 11, be there at 10. And, and just pick a time when people are not going there. And we lucked into it. There was light attendance, and more to the point, our friend that Nate knew was working the door. And so we got in, and it was the first time ever I got in to see the actual bar itself in action. And it's lovely, but it's teeny tiny. What? Maybe 30 people can fit in there?
Yeah, it's not even the size of La Cava, which I believe is 53 people. So that's really, really small by bar standards. But again, that kind of tells you why it's difficult to get in.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. The Four Seasons is back for season 2, starring Tina Fey, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, Marco Calvani, Carrie Kenny Silver, and Erica Henningsen. After a difficult year, your favorite group of friends continues their tradition of vacationing together, now with a baby in tow. From the Jersey Shore to upstate New York and Italy, their getaways are sure to take unexpected turns where comedy ensues. Watch The Four Seasons May 28th, only on Netflix.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? All right. Bring a date, your teen, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
What about places like the Rose and Crown Pub or like the Tune-In Lounge? Would those be family or adult?
I often think it depends on the time of the day, right? Everything feels family in the afternoon, and as it gets later into the night / people have been drinking a bit longer, they start to then feel naturally more adult.
That's an interesting question. The Rose and the Crown, I mean, again, it's kind of hard to measure some of the newer places at the Walt Disney World Resort versus that. Again, I've been around since '82, and they've got it down pat. I mean, how they handle people. Whereas,
Tune-In Lounge. The thing with that is a lot of people use Tune-In Lounge as waiting area for their reservation at 50's primetime.
Yeah,
and that's families.
Yeah, the irony here is what this makes me miss. Bringing up the Tune-In Lounge is the old Catwalk Bar that used to be, up on the second floor of the Downstage restaurant and sort of adjacent to the Hollywood Brown Derby. Loved that bar. Little quiet hideaway in the park. You could get away from the crowd. It was busy, but it was quiet.
Yeah. My lawyer says I don't know what you're talking about.
There we go. All right. So, love that place.
I think that's the thing we're after, right? For an adult lounge, you want it to be quiet with busyness so it doesn't feel like you're in sort of an empty place. You want energy there, but you want to be able to get away and rest and have a drink and feel like grown-ups within a Disney park. And I think as we hit the family lounge more, you want to be able to go to a place where you can all have fun as a family and make memories, and maybe it's a bit more boisterous and a bit more lively.
Yeah, that's a perfect description, a perfect delineation of what we're talking about here.
Chris, let me throw out one more lounge here and see what you guys think about it. It's over at Italy, and it is Tutto Gusto.
Ooh.
Would you say that is an adult lounge or a family lounge? Because meat and cheese, kids like cheese, right? Mm-hmm. And they've got bread. Bread and cheese is basically 2/3 of any child's diet. But it's also got wine and pasta. Okay, so noodles being
of any adult's diet.
Yeah, noodles being the other third of a child's diet, right? But Tutto Gusto, it's definitely something where the family could eat there and have a really good meal. But I feel like that's more adult just by the theming.
I think you're right, because as a family, we've never felt like we wanted to go in there.
And yet it's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe it just feels more adult because of the theming, and actually we'd have a lovely time.
Yeah, let's go with that. All right. You guys want to talk about satisfaction here real quick?
Yes.
Yes, I want my numbers.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with GO82.
Okay, so GO82 to start. And by the way, for comparison purposes here, these are unofficial guide, touringplans.com reader surveys. The average for all lounges in Walt Disney World, the average satisfaction rate is 92%, which means Disney's doing a very, very good job. That's a solid A across the board on average. Right? You get down, a couple more points higher or lower than that, you start to get, above and below average. GO82, again, average is 92%. GO82 is at 87%, which is definitely below average. So what do you guys think is the cause for that?
Do we think it's price point?
Literally my first guess. Jim, have you been here?
I have not since they changed it out. The irony is I was in there for multiple press events, just so I've been fascinated to get in there to see how that corporate lounge space was changed into an adult lounge space. But it's a weird little room though, right?
It's a lovely space. Again, theming is excellent. Service is fantastic. I love the food. I think Chris is onto something here though with the price point. So in the show notes, I've got a link to the GU82 menu, and you guys are going to see that cocktails there are generally $23 to $28. There's one that's $23. Most are in the $25 to $26 range, which, call me frugal, but I think that's expensive for a cocktail. And for comparison, I looked at the most expensive lounges in Manhattan, New York, to see what they are charging for cocktails. So one of them is Dear Irving, which all the cocktails are on $20. The St. Regis in New York, which is, I believe, the most expensive hotel, has a bar called the Old King Cole Bar, which is the most expensive bar in the most expensive hotel. So again, catering to tourists on vacation willing to spend money here. Those cocktails run $24. So $1 to $2 cheaper than Disney charging in EPCOT. I think that is part of the satisfaction here. It's good. You can't argue with the execution of any of it. It's the price point, which is bringing it down here.
Got it. Okay.
How does it compare to places like the Enchanted Rose and Trader Sam's and Ogres, I suppose?
Right. This is interesting because Enchanted Rose is the Grand Floridian. Again, you would expect upscale clientele. They're paying a lot of money to be in the Grand Floridian. I'm assuming most of the people that are there are either staying at the Grand Flo or maybe they're walking over from the Magic Kingdom. But if you're walking over from the Magic Kingdom to the Enchanted Rose and you know that it's at the Grand Floridian, you're kind of expecting higher prices. But still, Enchanted Rose, 93% satisfaction, which is one point higher than average, right? So yeah. The even more interesting thing is in Trader Sam's at the Poly, 95% in Walt Disney World, and I threw in 94% just for Disneyland as well. So Trader Sam's higher rated than Enchanted Rose or GOT2.
It's just like a psychological thing of we expect prices in hotels to be slightly higher because hotels, and therefore we expect prices in theme parks maybe to be slightly lower because we've already paid to go into the theme park. And perhaps it's a simple psychological thing like that. You feel slightly different by going to a lounge in a hotel than you do to going to a lounge in a theme park.
It's like being double charged. Okay.
There we go. Well, speaking of double, I wanted to ask how recently you've checked guest satisfaction at the Enchanted Rose. I mean, because it was the fall or late fall, early winter of last year that the bird cage opened up out in the lobby there. So you have a newly themed bar just a few steps away from the Enchanted Rose lounge, and just wonder if that impacted the numbers at all.
I don't think it has. For one thing, the birdcage lounge doesn't have taps to city water. So if you want water, you're getting bottled water. And I think that limits the types of drinks that they can serve to strict premixes and maybe stuff with a little bit of water. I don't think it's any kind of competition to Enchanted Rose, but it actually has access to a kitchen and running water. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So what about the family lounges? How did Ogre's, Beak and Barrel do?
This is really interesting because the first two that we thought of, Ogre's and Beak and Barrel, Ogre's in Walt Disney World, 86% satisfaction, which again is significantly below average considering 92% is average, 80% in Disneyland. And at that point in Disneyland, that's so far below average, that would get into our do not visit label for that particular bar. Yeah, so there are many other places in Disneyland that you can go to have a drink that's better than Ogre's.
I think Ogre's is a slightly different one, isn't it? Because I think you go to Ogre's for the photos and being able to say you went to Ogre's rather than necessarily for the drinks or the food. You're kind of going in to go in.
Yeah, it's bustling. It reminds me a lot of Beak and Barrel in that the theming is great. It's fun, but the feeling of like I'm here with as many people as can be packed in according to the fire code for 45 minutes with a 2-drink minimum or whatever. That's the thing I think that's putting people off there. It's it's not the same experience.
It is worth noting out in LA, in fact, starting this spring, headed into the summer, that, their version of Black Spire Outpost is the one that is now leaning heavily into, all Star Wars all the time. And Oga's Cantina, what's kind of interesting is now you can go in there, and this is supposedly where Han Solo is hanging out. That's interesting that, as sort of an artificial incentive to circle back to Oga's Cantina, that suddenly this is where, the guy who used to hang out in Cantina is back in A New Hope, and poor Greedo. Just the notion of, that they shoehorned this character into that venue. Which when you mentioned the 80% satisfaction level, there's got to be a connection there, Len. Got to be.
By the way, I think the character that they need to bring into Oga's Cantina isn't Han Solo, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because if you remember from episode 4, when he's talking about the cantina, he's like, it's a hive of villainy and treachery or whatever. That means that Obi-Wan has beef with every single person in that cantina from a past history thing. And you can't tell me that wouldn't be a really funny stand-up routine.
There we go.
That is an immersive experience I want to see.
Except I'm telling you. All right. So one quick thing to wrap this up. We've talked about satisfaction.
Oh, we didn't get Beak and Barrel. What were the ratings for that?
Beak and Barrel, 80%. 80% is so far below average. I would have to tell people, unless you're a completist or you really love Pirates of the Caribbean, you don't need to go to Beak and Barrel. Literally any other bar in any other part of Walt Disney World is probably going to be a safer bet. But Chris, I do want to go back to the wild card I threw in the middle of the show, Tutto Gusto. Tutto Gusto, 94%. One of the highest rated lounges in Walt Disney World. It's in Italy. It's in the back of World Showcase. It's kind of in the middle of World Showcase. So if you needed a break in the middle of the afternoon and you needed a drink, I mean, obviously my favorite choice is La Cava over in Mexico. But if you don't want to walk that far, Tutto Gusto is where it's at.
That's the sleeper hit.
You know what? I'm going to go there this week. I'm going to visit this week, see what the prosciutto is like.
Okay, let me know how that prosciutto is, please. Now, but hold on, just going back to things at the beginning. Your Honour, Judge Crater, are there any theories about what happened to him? It's been on my mind the whole way through this.
Well, given that we've just been talking about places at Walt Disney World that sell alcohol, well, you have to remember that it was the height of Prohibition when Crater disappeared.
Did he happen to run afoul of some rum runner somewhere?
Yeah, supposedly Legs Diamond, which again, perhaps, given he traveled in those circles, this is why among the showgirls that Joseph hung out with, he was supposedly known as Good Time Joe, but evidently when you run afoul of Legs Diamond, you don't get seen ever again. But enough about that time Prohibition. And speaking of time, what will we be discussing on the next edition of the Case for?
I thought that we could talk about the case for Lightning Lane versus Park Hopper at the Disneyland Resort, so out on the West Coast.
Ooh.
Oh, okay. That sounds like an excellent idea. But with that, another session in these hallowed halls. The court of the Disney World Resort has now come to a close. My thanks to our would-be barristers, theme park expert Len Testa and master illusionist Chris Cox, for arguing the pros and cons of adult lounges versus family lounges today. Just a reminder, though, folks, a full verdict won't be rendered until you, the listener, finally weigh in, and we'll be sharing your thoughts on an upcoming listener email show. But until that podcast airs, the Case for with Chris Cox is now closed. Thanks for listening, and this court will be back in session soon.